Well, what we talk about in our book, Authenticity, is that authenticity is really the new consumer sensibility, and which is the think of it as the primary buying criterion by which people choose who to buy from and what to buy. And every one of these economic shifts, from the agrarian economy through industrial economy, through service economy, through today's experience economy, has had a differing consumer sensibility, which is then twinned with a business imperative for what companies do about it.
Aloha, and welcome to another episode of the Groundswell Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Martin, and today we have the one and only Joe Pine. He's the author, or rather co-author, of Authenticity, which happens to also be the topic of this episode. And, Joe's been on the show numerous times, and he's one of my favorite guests to have. And this episode is perfectly timed in my mind because of what's going on, I think, in the world around us. And I think COVID, the rise of fake news, people are really looking for things that they trust. And we kind of do a dive into what that could look like, why it's a business imperative, and why this is really important more now than ever. And he's really broken down the actual process of understanding and how to take the most from becoming as authentic as possible and what the different types of authenticity is. So without further ado, let's paddle in. Welcome to the Groundswell Studios. Today I have the one and only Joe Pine. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Scott. It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
This is actually the third time, not second time.
Well, it's many more times you think about talking, but maybe it's the third time you've recorded our discussion.
Actually, technically it's the fourth time, because remember we recorded the Experience Economy and the thing didn't record?
Right.
Yeah, so that was a big letdown. So this is not going to happen this time. I'm tracking.
Good.
So thanks for coming on the show. And we had slotted this specific talk around your book, Authenticity. And I think the timing of it, and I just started talking about it before I did the countdown. And I think that this is a really timely topic, given COVID, the change of people's mindset and so forth. And I'm curious because I see that you're doing a ton of workshops, a lot of teaching, consulting around navigating these changes. Give me a little bit of lay of the land of where you think things are right now.
Well, if you think about what's gone on with this corona crisis, it's in fact the experience sector of all economies that have been cratered. It's restaurants and bars and movie theaters and theme parks and sporting events and concerts and plays and so forth. It's all the places where people gather, but any place that a lot of people gather is not any place anyone wants to be right now. And so it's a very, very difficult time for experienced stagers. And I think it's important, and frankly, many will not make it, just as many retailers will not make it. Many experienced stagers, particularly the more family-oriented one that don't have a lot of cash, don't have the sources of funding to fall back on. Because even as they open up, and today there are tons of movie theaters in some places are opening up, theme parks are opening up, but they're at such a low capacity that you can't possibly make money. Disney parks are open up at like 30% capacity. I saw today a LinkedIn post from a friend in the Netherlands who talked about 2 theme parks there, including the Efteling, that's actually older than Disneyland. And they announced their opening and they sold out tickets, but only at 30% of the park. And you can't make money at it. You can contribute to your fixed costs, but over long term, you can't make money at that. You can't make money at 50% of capacity. You've got to get most days up, well above that in order to be a profitable business. And so the demand is there still, that the corona crisis doesn't mean the end of the experience economy, because people are social beings and want to be with other people. People are experience seekers and want to have experiences. Research shows that buying experiences makes us happier than buying things. So the demand is going to be there, but right now we're not doing it out there. We're doing it in here. We're not doing it with the public. We're doing it with our family. We're not doing it physically so much as digitally. Digitally streaming and gaming and video sharing, right? All of those are exploding, and it's because of that fundamental desire for experiences that's still there and will be there when we come out of this.
Are you seeing any of these companies looking at expanding or diversifying their experience to a more digital experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So many of the companies are having digital elements to their experience. Merlin Parks did an experience a day sort of thing, and Disney was like talking about the magic behind it. You have many companies that birth new experiences, like Quarantine in New York is I love that name, Quarantine, is a, digital nightclub. You still have to pay a $10 entry fee to get into the nightclub. They have a doorman that ensures that you've paid that fee. They have a private room where you can get with a DJ playing, you get a private dance room, whatever, for $80. So that's still, you'll see things like that. TED, for example, the big TED conferences are going to where they're going to simulcast it out there. They should have been doing this for years. I'm sort of shocked that they weren't already. But they're going to simulcast what they're doing on stage live for a portion of the price that you get for being there physically, before you get to the level of the free videos that they have online. And that I think will happen a lot. I call it Twitchification. If you think about Twitch, where you take people that are playing esports and then you sell the access to watching people play video games, where you have a social element where they can talk with each other. I assume there's betting going on as well, and so forth. And I think that will happen a lot, is that even live experiences, we may only have 30% or 50% capacity for a while, but let's film it, let's show it online, and then let's record it and let's sell it again. I think that all of those are possibilities.
Yeah, I am surprised, like you are, that more businesses haven't already done this. Like, to me, I feel like this has been an inevitable potential, and business has been forced to use that. But you look at live events, and we brought the example of Twitchify, which I think is interesting. And anyone that's not familiar with this, I have a son who had gaming, and he spent more time watching other people play games than him playing games itself. And I asked him, I go, why?
What's with that?
And he goes, what's that?
I said, yeah, what's with that?
Well, in his mind, he was like, the guys that he was watching were somewhat entertaining. So they themselves were part of the experience. They were very witty and so forth. So that was one thing. So he kind of got a kick out of that. But the other was he wanted to basically get all the shortcuts to go play the game against his friends. And I'm like, what's the point of playing the game? The whole point of the game is to experience it in trial and loss. But, anyways, it didn't make sense to me. But I can see what you're saying, that there's almost like the element of live, watching live, something live, it's like very meta, as being almost another level of experience.
Yeah, well, I mean, I love to play golf, but I watch golf as well. And you do get some of that instruction about how they did things. They go, oh, maybe I could do that. Of course, I can't do anything that the pros could do. But, you say, I see how they approach that. Maybe there's something you can learn thereby. But it is a vicarious experience. I'd love to be out there myself, but I can't do that 24/7. So I can watch others do it. It's
well, I subscribed to MLB Live for a while, and I actually enjoyed it more watching through the internet than I did through watching TV, because it had a little close up of every pitch count. Like, you got more multi-dimensional content. And I kind of think for business and other businesses right now, one of the main tools is like streaming through social media or Zoom. But what do you think of like the rise of a much deeper experience, onboarding, offboarding, separate rooms? Like, I feel like we're like where dial-up was to streaming on mobile. We're at the beginning of this sort of face-to-face marketing, is kind of what I'm calling it. Where you're really kind of interacting in these really different rooms, but the technology, I think, still has a long way to go.
Well, yeah, so one of the companies that had, I thought, a great response to being shut down as a retailer is the jewelry stores Ideal in China. And
Okay,
what they
tell me
did is,
more. Tell me more. I haven't heard this.
yeah, so what they did is they got their retail associates onto WeChat and they started broadcasting live from the store. Different retailers retail associates would do it differently, and they would have different clientele, and they'd sort of be broadcasting. Here's our products. Here's let me show them to you. Let me try them on, etc. I haven't seen one, so I'm sort of imagining what they're doing. But it's theater, as we talk about in the Experience County, work is theater. They just put the store on stage and the retail associates there on a broadcast versus a face-to-face mechanism. And then people would be able to buy from them, and I go into a more private chat where it's just one-on-one. And one of the things I've long emphasized to retailers that they don't get with their website is, like, if it's worth you having a sales associate in a physical store to talk one-on-one with a customer and sell to them with a lot of downtime in between, then it's worth it you having a live sales associate online talking one-on-one with customers with almost no downtime in between, right? Because you can do capacity utilization in that. It's even more worth it there. But they know we just put up our website there, we just merchandise, and people are going to buy. No, get sales associates in there and get them talking to customers. Have the human-to-human experience that involves.
Oh my gosh, I totally agree. That human to human experience is what people are craving more than ever, especially with COVID, right? Like they want to have that human interaction. I mean, nothing says more like, I don't care about you than press 2 for sales and then you got a recording and all that stuff, right? That doesn't feel very real.
Right, exactly.
I don't feel taken care of anyways.
Right. And where so many companies, this is an authenticity point too, but where so many companies do is that they put those voice response units there to sort of prevent you from seeing a real human being. And I can remember when we didn't have to modify the term human being by the word real, but you do now with all those units, that there exists there to delay you from getting there and to deny you service because it saves them money. Well, you're missing out on the opportunity to actually talk with a real live customer.
Yeah, that whole automation thing has gone the wrong way. And I think that this COVID experience is pushing the pendulum very quickly in the other direction. I don't think people are standing for automation or even funnels and sales and things like that anymore. Right. They're requiring you, and in fact, not even just live over phone. They're almost looking for just live over video directly, like FaceTime.
Right. Again,
like the jewelry thing you explained was actually Noelani Love. She's a really close friend of mine. She lives in Hawaii and she's got a jewelry company, and she has watch parties, and they've been watching on Zoom as you described, and they would go around the store and they go, "Hey, can you try that on?" And they try it on, and she did like basically like a shop party with her members and exclusive offerings, and they got to try it on all there and stuff. And she said it went really well, and she tried to make it authentic by playing the ukulele live with them and stuff like that. And it's just, it almost was better than them going to the e-store. I think they did so much better. Yep. But it was forced on because her retail store was no longer open. Right.
And that's where you need to pivot.
So are you seeing a lot of this constraint creating new innovation?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, it sort of like necessarily does. That's what creates innovation, with some constraint that's out there, whether it's in a customer need or whether it's in a company issue of supply, and they can't get the supply out there. So they're going to innovate to come up with new ways of doing it.
So do you remember, so your book, Infinite Possibility, and you're talking about AR, VR and stuff, do you think this is going to push it faster in that direction?
I sure think so. I think that because I still, the basic point of infinite possibility is yes, you can create virtual experience, right? Digital experiences online. You can create real experiences. And I make the point that reality will now and forevermore provide the richest of experiences, right? It already comes live in 3D with no glasses, with 5 senses that you can engage and so forth. But there are simply things that are impossible to do in real life that you need virtual digital experiences for, including right now going to many of the retail stores. But what I think the greatest value is, or at least potential, right? We call it infinite possibility. Much of that infinitude, I guess, is in fusing the real and the virtual, having aspects of both. And that's what your friend in Hawaii is doing. It's not just, okay, virtual, go to our website, right? It's not, you can't come into our store. So let's me be live physical in the store. So I'm based in reality and I am live in real time showing you what's going on through a digital medium of a screen, right? Which defines what a virtual experience is, and fusing those two together.
So one of the things I agree, like one of the things I think is interesting is these destinations that are remote and they're really going to be suffering. And I had this thought when I heard her story. Part of the reason I think people are attracted to it, because in the background they could see she lived on North Shore. There's palm trees. It's like authentic, right? Like she is authentically Hawaiian, selling Hawaiian jewelry. And I'm wondering if there couldn't be this incredible opportunity for, I don't know, maybe a live cast of watching the sunset in some rare part of Nepal and charging people for the experience, even though they can't be there. You can syndicate it or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I think those sort of possibilities are there.
So let's get on the authenticity, because I think that this is really timely in my opinion anyways. And, you know, what I think has been floating around a lot with people is there's a shift in how people are buying, thinking, and engaging. You wrote a really good point of view document, and maybe that would be a good segue. I just finished reading it before you sent it to me this afternoon. I just read it. And you've been helping navigate clients through this sort of change. What's the buyer change that you think may or may not be impacted by authenticity?
Well, you know, what we talk about in our book, Authenticity, is that authenticity is really the new consumer sensibility. And which is think of it as the primary buying criterion by which people choose who to buy from and what to buy. And every one of these economic shifts, from the agrarian economy through industrial economy, through service economy, through today's experience economy, has had a differing consumer sensibility, which is then twinned with a business imperative for what companies do about it. You know, in the agrarian economy, the sensibility was simply availability, right? You think back to the time when there was a market in every town and the farmers would come in with their produce. And all they had to do was supply availability. That was their imperative. They get it to market, and then they'd find a lot of people who'd be to buy it there. But if you don't get it to market, they're not coming out to your farm, right? You got to supply availability. And then with the industrial economy, particularly after the rise of the system of mass production, you know, that Henry Ford innovated over 100 years ago now, the sensibility was cost. We wanted low cost. We wanted to buy things that we could never afford, that only the rich could afford, but now the masses could afford it. So what a company had to do was control cost. And if you did that, you'd go down the old learning curve of cost versus volume. And the more you lowered your cost, the more you could lower your price. The lower your price, the more people would buy. The more people would buy, the higher volume you had. The higher volume you had, the lower your cost, right? And it worked beautifully. But, of course, goods became commoditized, and we shifted into a service economy where we recognized the value of having people do activities on our behalf. That's what a service is. And that's where quality became job one. You know, the rise of quality as a movement, both in companies, including manufacturing, and as a desire by consumers, you know, that was coincident with the shift into the service economy. That quality really mattered because you're doing it for me, right? With goods, you know, it's basically you put it on a lot or you put it on a rack and you merchandise it, but it's not done for me. It's all done. It's all put in inventory and out there. Services are done for me, and now the quality really becomes important. So the business imperative was to improve quality. Well, as we shifted to an experience economy, as life became more and more of a paid-for experience, it was natural that people increasingly question what is real and what is not. And increasingly, they don't want the real, they don't want the fake from the phony. They want the real from the genuine. And so you have to manage that perception of authenticity inside of people. This is why it came up with experiences. I mentioned services are done for individual people, right? On demand to their needs. But experiences actually exist inside of us. It's our reaction to the events that are staged in front of us. And so you have to reach inside of people and get them to perceive your offerings and by extension, your places and your company as authentic. And that's why we use the term render authenticity. You need to render authenticity, which is creating that perception within them for authenticity. And the time we're going through today, where again, people realize, like we don't need more stuff. Stuff isn't what's important to us now. We've got enough stuff, but the experiences we have are what are important to us and what provide meaning to our lives. And so authenticity comes even more to the fore because of this crisis, just as experiences will come more to the fore as we are able to partake in them more and more.
You said earlier on something about real versus authentic. Are they not the same?
Well, they are synonyms. We might use them a little bit differently. They are synonyms, but authenticity, as we define it in the book, is one. It's individually determined, right? You get to decide what's authentic to yourself, and I get to decide what's authentic to myself, and you don't get any say in it, right? It's because we're all different people. We're all the pride.
It's like my own truth.
It all depends on who we are. So basically, think of authenticity as a sympathetic vibration that goes back and forth between who a consumer is, their identity, and then what they perceive the offering to be, and again the place and the company to be. Excuse me. And when they get that sympathetic vibration, they go, yeah, that's who I am. That's what I'm about. That's true to self, right? And those are the offerings that they perceive as authentic. Those that are true to self, one standard of authenticity, and also I'll add those that are what they say they are, the second standard of authenticity.
So that sympathetic vibration, is that not connection? Or is that just like my affinity for that, or my identify with it?
Yeah, it's a whole thing's wrapped up together, and you'd be hard even to tease them apart. But yes, it's identity, it's affinity, it's connection, it's involvement, it's aspirational, influential. It's things I view. Well, we have 5 genres of authenticity that we talk about in the book. That are basically natural, original, exceptional, referential, and influential. And all of those can be different ways of sparking that sympathetic vibration. I always love Virginia Postrel's formulation, where she talks about how people will look at something, and her specific example was a Rastafarian hairstyle, but applies to anything, where they look at that and say, "Oh, I like that," and then the reaction becomes, "I'm like that." Right? Wonderful formulation. I like that. I'm like that. And when they get to that, I'm like that, that's where that sympathetic vibration happens. I say, yes, that's again, my identity matches the identity of what I perceive this to be. And therefore, I'm going to view it as authentic, and I want it.
Okay. So when I think of authenticity, I think of it as being as the original or the genuine or the one that started it all. Is that it's so what you're saying is it doesn't have to be the originator. It just can connect to a certain tribe or audience.
Yeah. So what you just described is original authenticity, right? It's one of the 5 genres. And it is where you view it as the originator, the one of a kind, the one that, defined what this is all about. And, Apple, for example, has a high degree of original authenticity, or a Harley Davidson, you could think about a Patagonia, where, Apple didn't invent any of the products that it ever came out with, right? But it took them, it made them its own because of its design aesthetic that it has, that the objects are original. The stores are original. The geniuses are original. And so that exemplifies original authenticity. But we also have natural authenticity where it exhibits characteristics of nature, right? So that's where organic produce comes in. And personal body care. We want to be natural. We don't want to be, artificial and synthetic. Why? Because it enters into our body. Because we rub soap on our body. We put shampoo in our hair. We eat food, and we want those things to be natural. So that's another form.
What about like Doritos made with real cheese? Right? Like they're trying to somehow display that it's real and authentic, but
right.
It's not.
I can still remember what it was. Kraft, right? It wasn't macaroni and cheese. I remember it was a shells and cheese, right? But it said made with real Velveeta.
What? So it's like going, oh my gosh, it's Velveeta. I know that brand, but really it's like real fake because Velveeta isn't. There's nothing cheese in Velveeta,
and that's where virtually every company recognizes a desire for authenticity, but not every company can be authentic to every consumer or business person for that matter. So they do. Well, one of the things we say, we have three. We actually have five, but usually I only talk about three axioms of authenticity. Because to stop people from proclaiming their authenticity, right? That's, we say, the worst thing. Don't say you're real, just be real. Don't put real and authentic and genuine on your packaging. It's bad enough to put natural and pure and other things, but specifically don't use those words. Because number one axiom, if you are authentic, you don't have to say you're authentic. And axiom number two, if you say you're authentic, you better be authentic, because what have you done is you put a bullseye on your back, and people will play the game of gotcha. They'll actually go looking for things. It says, aha, you said you're authentic, but I see you're not, right? And that's when you get perceived as phony. And then the third axiom is that it's easier to be authentic if you don't say you're authentic.
Okay, so that's interesting because this ties into one of the things that I have a challenge with, which is business consultants telling their clients, you need to be more authentic. And I find that phrasing absolutely ridiculous, because I'm like, right, you can't be more authentic. You either are or you're not. Or am I wrong?
Right. And that's it's the case. It's difficult to be when you try and be authentic is often when the fakery shows through, because you're trying to fake it until you make it.
Yeah, totally. Like right now, people are saying, look, it's with COVID, you need to be more empathetic, more human. And then people are actually, I think maybe well-meaning, they're trying to be more empathetic, but really that comes across as being less authentic.
Right.
And I think that's just sort of this very interesting topic, because right now more than ever, it feels like people are really screaming for things that are real, things they can trust, that are authentic, whether it's products, services, or people. And this is, I just feel like this is such an interesting topic right now. Like, what's your take on where it's going to, like, how important is authenticity going to be moving forward?
Well, more important than it was in the past. We wrote the book Authenticity in 2007. And I mean, it's still valid today, but it's even more important than it was today. We always say, my partner Jim Gilmore and I always say, we're not futurists. We don't tell you what's going to happen. We tell you what's already happening. You just don't yet see it. And now, since that time, you can see authenticity more and more and more. And I do see less proclaiming of authenticity than I did perhaps 10 years ago, which I think is a good thing. But sometimes it does just, flabbergast you when you see things like real Velveeta.
Well, I reading this book, it feels as if you just wrote the book.
Well, thank you.
Like that's why I think it's so interesting. You and I booked this a couple months ago. The timing of this, and I think that it's just unbelievable alignment, because I read it over the weekend, and it feels like you just wrote this like not even 3 months ago. And I guess my thought is, you and I were talking very briefly. You said there's something next about authenticity.
Yes, and it's something that I'm sort of early on in thinking about, but
Oh, okay. So is this like top secret? We shouldn't talk about it.
no, we can talk about it. I used to not talk about it, but now I'm talking
This is a
about it.
great way to
I'm
kind of
actually
work out
been
your
thinking about
ideas.
it.
Like, so in real time, we can experience the evolving
That's right.
different topics
That's
that you
right.
come up with. This is amazing.
Right. So before I talk about it, one of the key things to understand is I talked about the progression of economic value before: commodities, goods, services, experiences. I don't remember when we last talked about the experience economy on your podcast, Scott, if we talked about the next level of value after that.
Go ahead and remind me. I mean, we had two podcasts, so we kind of got them jumbled together. So
Right. So basically, the next level is where you have a set of life transforming experiences that actually change you. And we call that a transformation. A transformation is where you're using a set of experiences to guide people to change, to help them achieve their aspirations. That's what a transformation is. So you hire a fitness center because you want to lose 20 pounds or gain washboard abs or become more fit or have higher well-being, whatever your particular aspiration is. You hire coaches of all stripes. We talked about, before we got on here, we talked about Tony Robbins. And he is in the transformation business. You don't just go to a Tony Robbins thing for the spectacle of it, although there's a great degree of spectacle. You go it because you want to change your life in some way. And coaches of all stripes that way: healthcare, management consulting. There's so many businesses. And in fact, the transformation sectors of the economy is almost as big as the experience sectors of the economy. And they're built on top of experiences, of course, because again, we only ever change through the experiences that we have. As the saying goes, we're all the product of our experience. So that then says, well, okay, what is to transformation as authenticity is to experiences? And I thought this for a long time, but I haven't been positive. But I'm becoming more and more sure. Still not quite 100%. But I think it is something that when I say it, you and your listeners will recognize as something very important in today's world, and that is meaning. Right? Meaning that it's beyond being authentic, that we view it as something we identify with. Meaning is something that aligns with who we are, aligns with our personal purpose, with our worldview about how we see the world, how we think things should go. And again, because of this pandemic that we're in right now, where we are hunkered down, we're with our family, we recognize, more than we normally do, the possibilities of death in our lives, with friends and loved ones, if not ourselves. And so it faces that very primary, I won't say quite ultimate, but primary question of meaning. What gives our life meaning? And more, that's what people are looking for in their lives, in the purchases that they make, and the companies that they buy from. And so my supposition, my hypothesis, almost my conclusion, is that meaning is becoming the new consumer sensibility, even potentially surpassing authenticity as the number one thing that people are going to be looking for in the future.
Interesting. So the meaning or meaningful, they're looking, what you're saying is that, and I agree, actually, when you look at people looking for trust and they're being really reflective. I love the saying that this is like the big reset or the great pause, because people are rethinking their values. So is this really about something meaningful that's aligned with their values that they connect to?
Yep.
And whether it's an interaction that's meaningful, or there has to be meaning in what I'm doing, or is it both?
Well, it can be both. People look for meaningful interactions, and those are interactions that help them, impart meaning in their lives, as well as, and it can be not just for them, but their families. It does relate to the values that they want, for example, their kids to grow up with, and who's going to help align with those values. And it does, in relation to transformation, it does help people become the people they want to become, right? So meaning is always, to a degree, aspirational. We are never as fully, we never fully live out our purposes. We're never exactly aligned or always aligned with what we seek out of life, but companies can help us get closer to what we desire in those areas.
So have you heard of David Allison?
I don't think so.
Yeah, so he came up with a database. It's about I can't remember how many million records, and it's some new research around value graphics, and is that consumers don't. We're not really our age. We buy based on things that we value, and targeting people should be what's been, I guess, the wrong way to market for marketers is demographics and different targeting. And he's saying it, and he argues it's on values. I'm actually doing a recording with him in a couple of days.
Okay, good.
And I think there's a real connection here because.
Yep.
He's espousing the same thing you are, which is people at their innermost, buying or working or doing of anything, they're driven more by the deeper purpose and something meaningful than all the different things that we've been targeting or marketing has been doing, saying that people of this age, and if you can make a marketing message that moves them emotionally, and he's saying it's not the emotion. It's not your message. You just got lucky. It was actually the values. There was a value that they connected to.
Yeah. Yeah. I hate demographics. I loathe targeting. I think we should stop marketing and start customering. And
yeah, we talked about that in my first episode with you.
Yeah. And we talked about, the experience economy 20 years ago when we came out with the first edition about worldview segmentation. And that's that value segmentation. It's based on who you are, what you value, and so forth. And that means you need to get down to that individual living, breathing person, right? That not a market or a segment or a niche or a generation or a demographic or a persona, right? All of those are meaningless. It's people.
So Simon Sinek, he has what's your why, and that creates meaning in the work that you do, and you're focused on your purpose, and that gives you fulfillment. Is it fair to say that this is really about marketing fulfillment, that you're actually purchasing, you feel more fulfilled because the purchase has more meaning to you? And that my question is it because the business was doing something meaningful that's aligned with your values, or the way that they produced it, or the way they delivered it, or is it just a piece of it, or is it much more than that?
Well, it can be any and all of that, in the sense that it could align with my values because of the sourcing of it, right? Of commodities. Mm-hmm. It can align with my values because of how you produce it. And you can think about animal, making meat out of animals and so forth as an example there. It can align with my values because of what you do at the service level. Combine with my values because of the experience you create for me and the transformation you elicit out of me. And that then it can align because of how you do or do not market it, which I prefer to use a more generic term of generate demand. Mm-hmm. Because again, there are no markets, there are only customers. So we got to stop marketing and start customering, or at least shift in that direction.
So I need to drop groundswell marketing for groundswell demand.
Well, groundswell demand generation. Now, I know, you got to recognize, the words that we use are always behind the concepts that are going on, because, marketing was coined sometime in the 1800s, I imagine. And there are still places where you need to do sort of mass things. You need to broadcast messages and so forth, but we need to shift towards more customering, towards more interacting directly with individual living, breathing customers, or if you sell to a business, to individual active corporeal enterprises, and then create customer unique value with them, for them, and in them. That's sort of my most Abraham Lincolnish.
That's perfect. Hey, so how could you identify someone's meaning? Like, what's meaningful to them? What would be a way that, as a business, you go, look, we're going to go and set out to connect with people that care about or find this meaningful. Like, where do they begin?
Well, one is to get back to Simon Sinek is you need to understand you have meaning as well. You have your own purpose. And I'm a big believer in meaningful purpose. My colleague Kim Korn and I, he co-wrote the Infinite Possibility with me. We're working on a new set of ideas. Have been for a while. That he's been thinking about and creating on how companies can thrive forever. How do you not fall into mediocrity and eventually fail? And the basic thing is, you got to innovate faster than your ecosystem, faster than anybody else out there, so you can come up with new ideas and continue to explore and exploit the possibilities. And one of the core 7 imperatives that we've come up with is that you need to infuse meaning in your people, in your employees, in your suppliers, in your contributors, all the contributors to your enterprise, so that people want to work for you, because the meaning you provide as a company, that meaningful purpose, that why, aligns with who they are as an individual. And I use the word align because it's rarely a perfect match, but it needs to align, needs to directionally move the worker, right, themselves, move them in the direction they want to go, while it moves your enterprise in the direction it wants to go. So fundamentally, the best way to find those customers is to simply be who you are with your meaningful purpose, fulfill that purpose in the world, and then customers that align with that will naturally gravitate towards you, your business, and your offerings. Now, outside
So it's
of
almost
that,
like a magnetic effect.
yeah, well, yeah, right. Isn't that the sort of the definition of charisma, right? Is you want a company with charisma.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. Like when you think about, I was working with a presidential candidate, and over the
Wait! You're a Canadian.
I know.
What are you doing down here mucking up in our elections?
Totally. Well, what happened was I actually helped a European election. I'll just leave names out, and they ran out of money, and they needed some help, and my idea worked, and they were successful, and that person was invited to this Democratic nominees campaign as a strategy, and they invited me down to help them. And one of the things I learned about that was how many voters are single issue voters, meaning you could disagree on all the different things that matter to them, but there's one issue that if you align with that, they'll forgive all the rest. And I'm just wondering how consumers, maybe how that would be maybe parallel to the way maybe people buy. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I think that applies to a lot of other products, right? That using the word products in quote there, but they will, like we talked about, it could be in your supply chain, the transparency of it, being fair trade and so forth. It could be in your manufacturing. It could be in your way of distribution, of servicing, of marketing, and so forth. And one of those could be paramount for every individual customer, and you hit them in the right spot. Then we say, okay, that's what I love. That's who I am. That's what I want to buy.
So you said fair trade, which is interesting, because I feel like sometimes businesses, in an effort to almost like, I don't know if even this is the right word, like greenwash their business and
all the time, not sometimes.
Yeah, like they go, hey, we use fair trade, but that's not really authentic. They're just buying into it, right? To sell. They're not really genuinely, like their intention is about just motivating buyers. It's not really to actually make a difference. Does that matter?
Yeah, it matters a lot because it's their motivation. Their motivation is why. I mean, if their why is to make a buck, whatever it takes, right? Well, then they're not going to get very far in an authenticity or a meaning meter. So
So there you go. An meaning meter or intention meter would be a valuable thing to come out with.
Yes, and so. But it gets back to it's the same thing with companies that proclaim their authenticity in their ads, on their packaging, and so forth, right? You don't want to do that. You just want to be.
So how does a consumer audit or even know? I guess they buy over time. It's a marketplace that decides over time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are ways to. It depends on how involved you are on your particular issue, how much depth you want to go to, but you can you can do your own investigations, obviously, or you can just live with your feelings about it. You will also see companies like Consumer Reports, that do for physical goods, whether you're a car or a washing machine or whatever, and they do all the analysis for you, and you just got to look at it. The problem, I always hated this about Consumer Reports, is that it's a mass mechanism. Is that whoever was reviewing, right, they'd have their own criteria, and based on those criteria, they would say, okay, this product is best. But the problem is, like you're just saying, as a consumer, my criteria is not the same as your criteria. Why don't you give me the raw data? Let me re-swiggle your criteria. Let me put the ones I think are most important. Let me weight them the way I want. And then let me find the best product for me rather than one product that you say is best because of who you are. In the same way, we could do that with meaning meters, right? You'd have a set of meters about how you think they're doing all these. And there are companies that do things like this. But ideally you do it on, again, that mass customized way is be completely transparent about all the numbers and let me reswiggle them the way I want to see what product most aligns with who I am.
So almost having like a personalized interface into the information so it can connect what's important to me by weight to the audit that's been given.
Right. And in China, they have this new social credit system.
I've heard of that. Wasn't that a show on Black Swan or something?
Black Mirror?
Some show. What's that?
On Black Mirror, you mean? Or
yeah, Black Mirror.
Right. Yeah, I don't probably was, but China's doing it for real. It's absolutely horrible, and but I think it's going to bite them in that. Because basically they're saying that based on Communist Party ideals, right? How good are you? But so the idea is that if at the very low end of the spectrum, you may not be able to get a job or to buy food and et cetera, right? If your rating goes down. But they're also going to be the fact that people are going to suspect people whose ratings are too high. They're going to say, "Sorry, you're a brown noser, you're Communist Party lackey, and we're not going to do anything with you either." So you have that that effect. But in the same way, you certainly could develop apps, and you can think about how people rate movies on IMDb or they rate hotels and restaurants on Yelp and Travel Advisor and all those things, is you could have one where people rate it based off of the authenticity or the meaning on a number of different factors, and have an app that you're walking around with and take that into account of what it is. And you may find people could curate that, like Martha Stewart or Chip and Joanne Gaines, if I remember right. I'm not a watcher. Have completely different aesthetics, but they have different followers. And you say, okay, if I'm a Martha Stewart person, then what Martha Stewart's like, I'm going to like. And if I'm a Chip and Joanna person, then what they like, I'm going to like. And so you could also have people that basically curate that say that if you align with my values, my meaning, then I can curate all this stuff, and this is what you want to buy.
Do you remember the author John Hagel? Do you know who he is?
Oh, yeah, I know John, actually.
Oh, hey, I want to get him on my podcast because so interestingly, he had a book after building virtual communities that had this notion about personalization, like what you're describing. And maybe ask him about it. It was like personalization meeting networks and sort of communities. And so that your values, your personal requirements would connect to totally an audible amount of information that let you know that this was perfect for you, this community, the actions and so forth. It was quite fascinating. I can't remember the book. I totally can't believe I pulled out of my memory, but
well, John is
he's amazing
great thinker. So
yeah. So if you know him, give him a nudge, say, hey, let's get on Scott's podcast. Let's talk about virtual communities and those things. So he might be someone you want to talk about on your meaningful thing. One of the things that strikes me, I know we're going to have to wrap up here, but is in the effort of authenticity in say restaurants. There's this big movement of farm to fork.
Yep.
And I thought that was great. It really did feel that, like they're describing the cow and how the chickens were well taken care of and all that stuff. And there's been many jokes about it. But unfortunately, with the COVID drop, all those farmers that were committed to that farm to fork, I've heard that they've just been left high and dry because they were using a direct distribution and they weren't part of the bigger distribution. And it's very disrupted. So I'm wondering if, in authenticity and meaning and in these efforts of trying to be, create this real intimacy of source and origin and stuff, is there a vulnerability to what I just described? Or is there some methodology or thinking around that leads it to being actually more scalable, more vibrant, more resilient?
Well, it is scalable. You can do that. You have a problem, which is that ubiquity tends to be the death knell of authenticity. That once you're everywhere, then people will say, okay, you're not special anymore and you're not authentic. And, you can see that with Starbucks. Starbucks.
Yeah, isn't that the same for any brand? It's almost like you get tired of it. Like every rise of every brand, like OP or, whatever, it just disappears, or does it just fade away?
Well, there are reasons, yes, but the authenticity is still a particular part of that. Yes, there may be other reasons as well, but there are many brands that Google's not having that problem. Amazon maybe a little more, but not as much. But it is a problem for a Starbucks because of the physical places, because so much of its brand is based on its authenticity. I always think no company more manages the perception of authenticity than Starbucks does. But once they become everywhere, they become part of what I can't think of his first name, Florida calls Generica, out there, that they're the same everywhere. Then they're no longer special. And if they're not special, they're not authentic.
So sort of wrapping up here then. So the importance of authenticity is to be more than different though, right? Like you're saying meaningful is maybe a next level, but it's also being original and all the different, you gave the different natural genres, and different things. So if you're going to go, look, this is an imperative. This is something right now that's become more pronounced, more interesting, more important. How would you sort of leave off this topic and have people think about going forward in their business about being more authentic? Even though I knew I was saying being more authentic.
Right. Well, we got a whole book on that, right? But the key thing one of the things we talk about in the book is you have to think about these two key standards of authenticity, of one being true to self and two being what you say you are to others. And not everybody should even try to be authentic on both of those. That's what we call being real. You think of Disney, for example. Disney is not what it says it is. It's not the Magic Kingdom. It's not Cinderella's castle. If you sprinkle pixie dust on you, you're not really going to fly. But it's wonderfully true to self. That they manage everything to create this make-believe environment, but to create this reality, right? They create this reality that people can come to believe. And that's what we call being fake real, having a fake reality, but yet people can view it as authentic. So Disney, should really never try to be what it says it is. It's always about these, fantasy story environments. So you have to decide sort of where you are on that matrix, that 2x2 of are you true to self? Are you not true to self? Are you what you say you are to others? Are you not what you say you are to others? And then think about how you go about doing that. How do you have to state your identity. Who are you? Well, who's the self to which you must be true? And we got 5 different elements of that identity, including your purpose. What's your sense of purpose? What's your body of values? And then on the other side is you have to identify your statements, right? You have to see, what do you say about yourself in your public pronouncements, in your marketing, in your packaging, in your terms and conditions, and anything that you state who you are. You have to identify what those are and see if you're in fact being those, or if you're being fake or phony. And that will then allow you to figure out how you can best appeal to this new consumer sensibility of authenticity.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm exactly 3 minutes over my allotment of time. Thank you again. That was great. I know I'm going to wrap it up quick here. So, and I love that consumer sensibility. I'll put the book in the show notes as well. But
Great.
Thank you again so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Scott. It's always a pleasure.
Awesome. Well, we'll have you back again anytime you want. and please talk to Mr. Hagel, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And for everyone else out there, thank you so much for being on the show. And really appreciate you tuning in. It's groundswell.fm. I've got a mic on there so you can leave me a voicemail and let me know. In fact, I'm actually going to say it here. I'm about to announce a contest for people to leave me their voicemail. It'll be on my next podcast, so just listen for that. And until next time, thank you so much for listening. Mahalo.